Good morning, honorable members and our guests, our officials.
Morning, Chair.
Okay.
Good morning, Chair.
I think the volume is too low. Let's start our meeting. Ariko, can you indicate whether we are a quorum or?
We do form a quorum, Chair. There are 6 members on the platform.
Thank you very much. Let me welcome everybody in the meeting, the ones who have managed to join, understanding that it is a one day after our 16 days of activism, which we always have hopes that at least this sketch of abusing women and children, and it's going to come to an end one day. But we are trying our level best as government to try and I don't know whether to come up or to reduce it or to fight with it. But as women, we have tried our level best. We did the awareness campaigns. We tried to get people that they think that they are with us on this. We've got also men that are assisting and also are apologizing with us. They called it Men for Change. All these structures have been set, but the reality of the matter, this continues. I think now it needs God's prayer, but God assist whoever assists herself or himself. But I want just to say to our honorable members and our guests and also everybody, we can't as women fight this thing, but we have to assist one another. And it also needs communities. We understand that these laws sometimes have got some flaws and they need to be amended in terms of these paroles that are being given to people, and then the people will come back with the community at the communities, and then they will do the same thing that they did. If they murdered someone on that particular month, it's said that they need blood to be in streets, but they will do the same thing and they'll get a parole, which we don't want that to happen. One who has done a very bad thing must rot in jail. So there are those flaws that we need to amend, and we know that we are policymakers. So we need to assist one another and think, what is it that is needed? What do we need? It's going to be worse during this month that we call it 16 days of I wanted not to I wanted, if I am also a person who is able to influence policies, I was going to say this 16 days of activism. Once upon a time, former President Thabo said, let's not call it 16 days of activism and open it on the 25th and then close it on the 10th December. Let's say it's a 365 days rather than, I don't know, when can we do that and how are we going to effect it so that people can understand it. It's throughout the year. It's not a one-day show or 1 month show. Thank you very much for listening to me. It is because of frustration and not sure what to do exactly with this. Otherwise, the meeting is officially opened, and today we have to make sure that at least by 10 to latest, but 1:45, we need to adjourn so that we can be able to join the chair of chairs meeting. And that's it. Thank you very much. Ariko, assist us with apologies and also flight the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. We've received the following apologies. Mr. Milam, who due to other engagements is unable to attend the meeting this morning. Also, Mr. Kwankwa, who's attending the Chief Whip's Forum this morning. is unable to attend the meeting. And then an apology from the Minister of Electricity and Energy, Minister Ramagopa, who due to cabinet meetings is unable to attend the meeting. Then we've also received an apology from Minister Ntshavheni, who due to prior engagements is unable to attend the meeting. Then I've been informed that the acting DG, Mr. Subesh Pillay, will be in attendance, but he has a meeting at 12:30 that he needs to attend, Chair. So if we are still busy during that time at 12:30, he requests to be released at 12:30, Chair. Those are the apologies received, Chair. And then let me just proceed to the meeting of today. It's a continuation of our energy stakeholder engagement on the municipal distribution electricity industry. And today we'll be briefed by the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, NERSA, and the Presidency on the municipal electricity distribution in electricity industry, Chair. So those are the items for today, Chair. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Can I see the hand that is accepting the apologies as presented and also adopt the agenda as proposed? Honorable Fassi.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm happy to move for the adoption of both the agenda and acceptance of the apologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You sound better today. I know that you are flat with flu, so we want to say speedy recovery to you and understand. Honorable Bapti, you are welcome, Honorable Fassi.
And I am seconding the proposal.
Yeah, you sound too far. Can't you come closer?
Yes, sorry about that. I second the proposal, ma'am.
Thank you very much. The agenda has been adopted and seconded, and also the apologies have been accepted. What is next? Ariko?
We'll proceed with NERSA, Chair. Presentation by NERSA.
So we'll start with NERSA. NERSA, the leader of the delegation, must come forward and tell us what is it that you are bringing to us. Lower your hand, Honorable Bapti. Over to you, NERSA.
Good morning, Chairperson, Honorable Chairperson. Good morning, members of the Portfolio Committee and everyone who has joined us this morning. My name is Nomalanga Stole. I'm the CEO at NERSA. Chairperson, our presentation that we have been requested to prepare and come and address the Portfolio Committee is going to be led by Ms. Nomfundo Maseti, who is the full-time regulator member responsible for the electricity regulation within NERSA. Chair, I believe the presentation has been forwarded to the Secretary. If we can be assisted to have it flashed. And with your permission, Chair, I will hand over to Ms. Maseti. Ms. Maseti, ma'am, over to you.
Chair, I'm not sure if Ms. Maseti might be having maybe challenges. If you don't mind, my name is Rulani Matebula. I am the executive responsible for electricity regulation at NERSA. I would want to start and take the members through the presentation.
Okay, I can see that Ms. Massetti hasn't yet joined. Maybe she's still trying to log on. Then you can continue whatever way that you think you'll start. It's up to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Can I confirm that members are able to see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we can see it. It's okay.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity once more to the members. We have constrained our presentation specifically to the matters that the members had highlighted as per the communication received by the regulator. The items talked specifically to the status of municipality cost of supply studies, the implementation of the cost of supply studies, the adherence to distribution license condition, as well as the status. It also requested that we talk to the failure to adhere to distribution license by the licensees and what is the current status, the progress, and what are we doing about it as the regulator. We also were requested to outline conditions for acquiring a distribution license and also to talk to the monitoring and evaluation of distribution license condition and how that is actually carried out. However, Chair, if there are other items that members would want us to clarify, I think we can be able to address that. Chair, in terms of the cost of supply studies, this journey started way back in 2020-2021 financial year, where as a regulator, we requested that the licensees in their process of supplying or applying for tariff with the regulator, their applications should be accompanied by the cost of supply studies. In that particular year, Chair, we received out of the 178 expected cost of supply studies, we only received 34. And when the regulator reviewed the 34 that it had received, only 2 were actually aligned to the framework that the regulator had actually provided to guide the licensees on how they should actually conduct these studies and how they should actually be documenting the findings of the studies. Chair, during that time, we also requested the involvement of Treasury and COGTA to assist in the process, as we believed that the process of conducting a cost of supply studies will assist in ensuring that the tariffs that we arrive to as the regulator are cost reflective. Chair, however, in that year, as it was the initial phase, the results did not yield, or the effort did not yield much results. But I am glad to indicate, Chair, that in the following years, we started seeing progress. I can report that in 2024-25 financial year, out of the 178 expected licensed and distributors, we received up to 76 cost of supply studies. And
Chair, my apologies, Chair. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but from my side, I'm not sure. Okay, now I'm seeing the changes in the slides. Thank you, Chair. It was just the changes of the slides that we are not seeing. And I'm not sure if it is actually in slide show mode. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Matubela, can you put it on slideshow?
Yeah, on my side, it's on slideshow at the moment. Let me just do this. You will guide. Please, if you can confirm that I'm now on slideshow.
From my side, it doesn't look like it. I'm not sure.
Let me stop sharing and try and reshare again.
Okay.
Apologies for that, Chair.
Or otherwise, Mr. Matubela, let me project.
That will be perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary.
Excellent. If we can just move to, I'm not sure which slide the members were still on, but I was on this particular slide, which talks to the 2024-25 financial year, where we are saying, Chair, that we have seen an improvement in the number of cost of supply studies that were supplied by municipalities. And that was an increase of 43% from the previous year. And Chair, in the year 2025-26, which is the current year, when we, as the regulator, were processing these applications from the distributors or municipalities, we received 177 of the 178. And cost of supply studies accompanied all the tariff applications that the municipalities had actually supplied to the regulator. However, Chair, you will see that on the slide I'm saying we achieved 100%, and I'm also saying excluding Phumelela. So Phumelela is our 178th municipality. However, they did not participate in this year's tariff application because they had ceded their responsibility of distribution back to ESCOM. So therefore, that left us with 177 applicants, and all the 177 applicants had their cost of sale supply studies actually attached to their application. And hence we are saying 100%. And Chair, we appreciate the support that we received from SALGA as well as COCTA in ensuring that we could achieve this milestone, Chair. If we can move to the next slide, you can move to the next slide. Here, we just wanted to indicate some of the outcomes when we analyzed this cost of supply studies that were received by the regulator. In the next slide, I'm actually specifically indicating that 2.82% of the cost of supply studies that we received as the regulator was actually indicating that a tariff in the range of up to 10% would be able to afford the municipalities to be able to have a cost reflective tariff. However, 55.37% was indicating that municipalities will need in the range of 10 to 20% tariff to be able to cater for their costs, or for the tariff to be cost reflective. And 36.16% on those studies that we received indicated that those municipalities that fall within that category will need up to 50% in terms of tariff to be able to have the tariff that is cost reflective. And about 5.65%, Chair, were even in excess of 50% that the municipalities required. But obviously this, Chair, is contributed by many reasons which municipalities are aware of in their area of supply. If we move to the next slide, Chair, before maybe I talk to the licensees, just a parting shot on the cost of supply. Our framework actually guides that all cost of supply studies are valid for a period of 5 years, unless in cases where there has been huge alterations or changes in infrastructure or in the area of supply. Then and only then the cost of supply studies should be revised and be sent to the regulator. However, if no such changes happen, the cost of supply studies remain valid for a period of 5 years. Chair, moving on to the issue of adherence to license conditions. Chair, as the regulator, guided by the Electricity Regulation Act, Section 16 to 18, also Section 29, we have a responsibility as the regulator to ensure that the licensees actually comply to the license conditions that are attached to each of the licenses that were issued to them by the regulator. If we look at the next slide, Chair, what we are indicating there is some of the key compliance areas that we actually focus on whenever we do our audit as a regulator. You would also see, Chair, in this presentation where I talk to the conditions that institution actually obtaining a license, where we are saying that we require an institution to have the capacity administratively, financially, to be able to carry out this service before we can actually issue a license. So therefore, it is our responsibility, Chair, as a regulator, to ensure that the license holders, they remain within the ambit of the conditions that were attached when the licenses were actually approved. So hence, Chair, we always look at whether the licensees still have the capacity to be able to maintain the infrastructure, to be able to provide the quality of service that they are expected to provide to the area of supply. And that talks to issues of vacancies. We talk to issues of budgetary requirements, whether the incomes from these electricity sales are ring-fenced and channeled to ensuring that the infrastructure remains sound, that there is enough resources to be able to provide the quality of supply that is expected. We also look at whether there are maintenance plans that are relevant to and updated to be able to respond to the needs and demand of the infrastructure. We also look at issues of energy losses, whereby there are technical and non-technical losses that each distributor would from time to time experience during the course of the supply of this energy. And we do audits in that space. We also look at issues of compliance to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, as that is also key when we carry out, more especially the services that also involve this commodity that can also be dangerous when not handled with care. Chair, in the next slide, what we are trying to indicate is that in the recent audits that we have done, we actually have picked up that the vacancy rates in different distributors ranges from 20% to 73%. And this has an adverse impact on the efficiency and effectiveness and the quality of supply in the areas that these distributors are actually licensed to supply. We also have seen that there is a lack of ring fencing for various reasons of the incomes that are actually derived from the electricity sales to be forecast and channeled to the maintenance and operation of these electricity infrastructures. We also have seen that there is a huge backlog in terms of payment on the bulk supply services, which are provided by Eskom. We also have seen that many of these municipalities do not necessarily have appointed occupational health and safety responsible individuals who are supposed to ensure that these services are actually carried out in a safe manner. That also talks to the state of the infrastructure in terms of exposing and imposing a risk to the communities where these services are actually rendered. We have also identified that there is inadequate maintenance in many of the infrastructures within our municipalities. Maintenance is not carried out according to the requirement of the maintenance standards of the electricity infrastructure. And there is also budgetary constraints when it comes to budgets that are actually allocated for the maintenance and operations of these infrastructures. We also, Chair, have identified that there is huge losses that these municipalities are experiencing, and that stems from both the technical as well as non-technical losses. And that, Chair, requires to be addressed, as it also impacts on the cost reflectiveness of providing this service. Chair, we also have realized in our audits that there is absence of load forecasting, where there is no updated master plan that talks to the energy demand in the future and the required infrastructures to respond to that demand. Chair, in the next slide, we want to briefly talk to the actions that, as the regulator, we are expected to take and we are taking. So at any time when we conduct our audits, Chair, we provide reports that indicates the status of each of these municipalities. We actually share the outcome of our audits with the municipality and also agree on the expected actions that we believe needs to be taken to be able to address the issues. We also have this reports shared and approved, considered by the regulator board in terms of understanding what the outcome of these audits were. However, Chair, the Act actually mandate us that in a cases where there is non-compliances to license condition, the regulator may sit as a tribunal to actually address these non-compliances by issuing compliance notices and many of the outcomes as stipulated in section 17 to 19, as I highlighted earlier, Chair. I must indicate that this is an activity that the regulator has gone through a process to ensure that it is ready to discharge this duty. It was a prerequisite that the regulator need to have rules that governs how this tribunal will actually be conducted. And those rules, Chair, have been consulted and have finally been gazetted. And that has put the regulator now in a position to be able to sit as a tribunal and be able to issue those non-compliances to the non-compliant municipalities. Chair, in the next slide, we are now talking to conditions as requested on how does the regulator actually come to a decision of issuing a distribution license. So, Chair, we consider, amongst others, things that are talks to corporate and ownership structure. We look at business plan regarding the supply of this service. We look at the proof of capacity, as I alluded to earlier, whether the institution is administratively in a position to be able to fulfill the duties and requirement of supplying this particular service. We also look at the technical capacity of an institution on whether this institution has the required technical capacity, the required technicians and engineers that will be able to ensure that this infrastructure is maintained, operated properly, and in compliance with the available standard to be able to ensure the quality of supply. We also look at capacity financially on whether the institution has the financial muscle or the financial backing to be able to carry out the work that talks to the supply of this particular service. We also look at whether the institution has got a take-off point from wherever it will be receiving this electricity from. Currently, it mainly refers to Eskom, but I believe that as we move forward with the reforms, this electricity could be coming from different generators. We also look at, obviously, the maps and diagrams to ensure that the correct boundaries or there is clear boundaries in terms of which areas will be supplied to avoid encroaching in other areas which might have been previously authorized to another distributor by the regulator. Chair, in the next slide, we also just enhance on the conditions and the process, where we are saying that whenever such an application is brought to our attention, we have a duty and responsibility to ensure that this is communicated to the public or we consult the public to get their views in terms of the application. And Chair, based on the response that we receive, then we proceed to finalize the process. And depending on the type of objections or the type of feedback that we receive, then we can proceed to decide on whether the license is issued or is not. Chair, this probably takes me to the last slides that I'll be sharing today, which talks again to the monitoring and evaluation. Chair, I need to indicate that the roles and responsibilities of the regulator has, over the years, increased in terms of scope. And this was brought about the changes, obviously, in our electricity industry. Chair and members would recall that South Africa has moved from the vertically integrated supply industry, where Eskom was the only responsible distributor, transmitter, and generator of electricity. We moved into a phase where Eskom became what we called a single buyer. And that is when there was an introduction of the independent power producers. These were also licensed generators, which were licensed by the regulator. And obviously it introduced a new scope for the regulator, whereby each licensee or each institution that is licensed by the regulator continues to have a responsibility to ensure that the conditions that were attached to that license are actually complied to at all times. So with the number of licensees increasing, Chair, the number of monitoring responsibility by the regulator actually also increased. And Chair, today we are talking about the introduction of the wholesale market as enshrined in the currently amended Electricity Regulation Act. Chair, that also has increased a burden on the regulator to ensure that all the participants in the market are also licensed, and the conditions attached to their licenses are also monitored at all times. So, Chair, the regulator has taken the necessary steps to ensure that it capacitates itself. However, those processes are still unfolding to ensure that the regulator has enough resources, both personnel and financial resources, as well as technological resources, to ensure that the regulator can be able to take care of this added responsibility that it's now faced with. And Chair, the responsibility obviously cut across all the activities that the regulator is expected to discharge its responsibility on, and that talks to the generation, the transmission, the distribution of electricity in the country. So there is still a lot that the regulator is currently doing to ensure that it is fully capacitated to be able to carry out these roles. One of them, Chair, is what I just indicated recently, that the regulator have just finalized and gazetted the rules so that it can be able to sit as a tribunal to be able to deal with all non-compliant licenses. Chair, probably this might be the end of my slides, but Chair, I just want to highlight one thing with regard to how we carried out the tariff approval for municipalities in this year. Chair, the process with the regulator started receiving applications during the month of April and May of this year. Unfortunately, some of the applications only came through in June. And this was after the regulator has actually pleaded with the Minister of Finance to be able to be given additional time to consider these applications, to be able to ensure that all municipalities by the 1st of July have approved tariffs. As if the municipalities do not have approved tariffs or tariffs approved by the regulator, they do not therefore have the authority to charge a particular tariff in the year that began in July. And Chair, the regulator had to do all it can to ensure that all municipalities, 177 of them, are processed so that they can be able to have their tariffs as of the 1st of July. And Chair, I believe that Ms. Massetti will also talk to this when she comes in. I see she has a hand up. I will end here, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Ms. Massetti, you are welcomed. Do you want to add anything out of the presentation?
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning to the members and the other colleagues on the call. And thank you very much, Chairperson, for the opportunity to present and also just to augment just for purposes of the emphasis. Chairperson, what I would like to just add is the issue of the cost of supply studies. I want to emphasize that it is the first time since the existence of NERSA that we managed to get all the municipalities to submit cost of supply studies. And this is because of the work that has been done by NERSA and getting, external company to also assist just to do some workshops showing how the municipalities are supposed to come up with their cost of supply studies, of which cost of supply studies must comply with the cost of supply framework or methodology that was developed by NERSA. That methodology was approved by NERSA in 2016. So all that it does, it just shows how they supposed to go about it, classifying the costs, identifying the cost, then we split the cost. So on the basis of that, then they are shown how to develop their cost of supply studies in recognition of the fact that some municipalities, they do not have the required capacity to do so. So NERSA started with that process early this year around February and March, and there was very good attendance, and that then resulted in us achieving 100% submission by all the licensed municipalities, which is a great milestone that at least we have achieved this year. Now, what we then, because they were now trying to use that cost of supply study as a basis of coming up with their tariff applications, obviously the municipalities again struggled in terms of formulating their applications. Hence, some of them, due to some other challenges as well, they submitted a bit late. Now, what then happened is that, and this is also just to make the committee aware that most of the applications that were received, they were received in time, and we were very much transparent in terms of that. We put notices so that we indicate how many have submitted, how many have not submitted, and by when. Every time we receive it, we then publish. So most of them were published for 30 days. And then some of them, as we're now getting closer to the deadline that was then granted by the Minister of Finance, that deadline was the 20th of June. Then some of them could not make it the 30 days. Instead, then we used what is provided in terms of PAJA, which is then the 14 days that is prescribed in PAJA, and the specific factors that are prescribed in terms of PAJA, including the priority and also some statutory requirements and so forth. So all of that was looked at by NERSA in terms of assessing those. As you will appreciate, also the capacity that we are facing, because we only depend on the licensees to submit applications. Some of them then, I think it was only 1 or 2 that then submitted closer to the deadline. Now it was a question of considering the public interest, but also just the issue of the risk that will be faced by the municipalities in terms of not having the tariff at all for the financial year come 1st July 2025, and what will then happen to the consumers or the customers within that municipality. So one also had to balance such interest on the part of the municipality, but also the risk in terms of customers that are being served by that municipality. So we thought that is quite important that we also give due consideration to that. Now, what's going to happen and going forward, Chairperson, and I would like to touch on this because I'm sure maybe the members of the committee will be interested in the recent judgment that was delivered, of which judgment there's still a part that has not been finalized, and that part that has not been finalized, it has to do with the orders that the judge would like to make in respect of the matter that was filed by AfriForum. First of all, it is an issue of the cost of supply studies, that when there are applications for tariffs, they want NERSA to also publish cost of supply studies so that stakeholders and customers can comment on both. However, we don't have the jurisdiction now of talking to cost of supply studies, but for information purposes, then that will be published. I think just the issue there, it was the issue of the commercially sensitive information, and as an administrative body that is required in terms of the law to protect confidential information, we had to comply with PAIA in terms of protecting commercially sensitive information. However, the judge decided otherwise, and we then appreciate the fact that the judge then see the way that the court has determined. Just to also indicate that in terms of the electricity pricing policy, the cost of supply studies are valid for 5 years. What this means is that when the municipalities or distributors submit their tariff applications, it is not expected of them that they will submit cost of supply studies every year, because we have them now. Then they are valid for 5 years unless there are significant structural changes and also on the customer base and so forth. So the electricity pricing policy, or the EPP, does specify under what circumstances will they be required to be revised. Other than that, they are valid for 5 years. What we need to do from our side, Chairperson, which we've started doing with some of the municipalities I won't mention, some of these cost of supply studies, they comply insofar as the framework that I mentioned is concerned, in terms of classifying the cost, identifying the cost, and where to allocate the cost. What we observed as we scrutinized them is the issue of the accuracy in the cost drivers. What are the cost drivers? What should be allowed? What should not be allowed? We had seen some of the increases which we did not implement. Some of the increases, they go to 90% increase. Some of them, they go to even 100% increase. We have seen those in terms of the results of the cost of supply studies. So we also indicated in the decisions that we will do our independent verification and audits. So this now talks to financial audits that NERSA must also undertake, and we are trying to capacitate ourselves so that we can be able to undertake for all of them, because we've got 177 municipalities, and that obviously talks to the capacity that we require. The audits that we have always been doing, not only to the municipalities but also to the other distributors, including ESCOM, are audits pertaining to transmission as well as distribution. So those are technical audits mainly, but we also need to do the financial audits. That will also assist us when we get reports in terms of the audited financials from the municipalities, and NERSA apply the clawback. In the case of ESCOM, it will be the regulatory clearing account, so that we are able to identify instances of over recovery that is undue or under recovery, so that we also make sure that there is no undue revenue shortfall for the municipality where that is something that they are entitled to. So that is very important that we also understand that, so that we all balance the interest of the stakeholders, and the municipality also receive what is due to them. That is in terms of the cost of supply studies. The other thing that I just wanted to indicate, which is something that we have observed, is that once NERSA approves tariffs, there are other costs that are added sometimes by the distributors, and some of those costs are not costs that NERSA has approved, number one. And secondly, these are not costs that NERSA has jurisdiction over. One of those, if I were to give an example, is the issue of surcharge. The surcharge is not within NERSA's mandate. It is within the mandate of the legislation that is administered by the National Treasury. And that is just additional costs that they are clarified there. However, even before such surcharge is imposed or levied, it is important that norms and standards are developed so that it is very clear under what circumstances such additional cost pertaining to like a provision of utility services. It is not just for electricity, but also for water, for instance, in terms of that legislation that is under the National Treasury. So to the extent that then there are costs relating to electricity, we would expect that because all of these licensees, including municipalities and all other distributors, to the extent that they presented to us their cost of supply. Now, there's no indication that there are costs that have not been included there. One would want then to understand why utilize that provision that is there, and then you claim that it is a cost related to the provision of electricity, and that has not been brought to the regulator that has an exclusive jurisdiction over any prices, tariffs, rates, and cost, and that is in terms of Section 15 of the Electricity Regulation Act, that all of such things are within the mandate of the energy regulator. So if those are genuine cost and they are reasonable cost and recognizable cost, surely they must be brought to the attention of the regulator so that we exercise our due diligence in terms of that, instead of going outside of what NERSA has already approved and utilize another piece of legislation to your advantage, but to the detriment of consumers. So those are some of the things, obviously, that we have identified, and we are working closely with the team is working closely with the team in the National Treasury with regards to the establishment or development of the norms and standards as required in that act, and also just to make sure that these things are clarified. The other main thing that is important for the committee's consideration is the weak enforcement model that we have as the regulator for the regulator to become effective. And this is going to be very important given the fact that we are now transitioning to a competitive market, and that NERSA is given a mandate in the new legislation to make sure that it steps up, and by making sure that it introduces competition and fairness in the market. NERSA is required to obviously enforce the rules and become effective. Now, we won't be able to do that to the extent that we would like to. Why so? It is because of the provisions in the Electricity Regulation Act. One of those provisions is Section 18 of the Electricity Regulation Act. What it does, that act, it gives NERSA powers to issue notices of non-compliance. A notice of non-compliance is simply a notice of telling someone or the licensee that what you are doing is wrong. And after doing that, and if you find that indeed yes, the evidence, but before you inform or issue that notice of non-compliance, NERSA must wear a different cap. It means we must sit as a tribunal before we can tell a licensee that you are not doing something that is consistent with the law, and you are also not doing something that is consistent with the conditions or the obligations of your license. Before we tell them that, it means we must sit as a tribunal and therefore, hear the matter and make sure that then once that is proven, we then issue a notice of non-compliance. After having issued the notice of non-compliance, we must give them reasonable time to remedy the non-compliance, the wrongdoing. So that we normally call the yellow card. But what one would expect is that, obviously, if you had given somebody a yellow card and that person does not comply, or maybe repeat that same conduct or repeat the wrongdoing, say 5 months later, you can't again go to that person and say, again, we issue you with the yellow card, what you are doing is wrong, and keep on doing that. And then they will now say, oh, well, until NERSA tells us, we'll keep on doing what we are doing. But what we know is that every time that we're doing something wrong, NERSA must now, first of all, tell us that we are doing something wrong. But it will never land immediately on the red card. You land on the red card only if they have not remedied what you said they must remedy. So that is a problem. And in the SAWEN, in that platform, we will not have the time of now going around and sit and take the decision procedurally and all of that for us to be able to deal with the non-compliance. And that is going to be a legal risk. And also, it might, if other parties that are there that are independent, participating in the platform, in the SAWEN market, and they feel that there's some abuses that are happening there, and that also there's market power exploitation in terms of some higher prices and some information or supply that is withheld, which then results in artificial prices going up, and therefore information is discovered who did this, how. Then NERSA must now sit and say, we sit as a tribunal, what you are doing is wrong. And maybe that conduct would have gone, but people would have lost money. And then what happens? So those are some of the things that...
Chairperson, can I please raise a point of order?
Chairperson? Hello.
Yes, can I please raise a point of order? This input by Ms. Maseti is very detailed and it is quite lengthy. And I'm beginning to wonder why it was not in the presentation, and if it was in the presentation, why is it being regurgitated? So I don't understand the point of such a long presentation after a presentation has already been made on the matter. Thank you.
Okay, Honorable Member, I've given her a chance because she had some challenges to connect. So she was the one who was going to do the sort of an opening and presentation, in fact, before even the presenter could start. So I'm giving her an opportunity to do that because of that. Maybe what you are saying, it has been presented, but I don't think so. She is speaking something that it hasn't been said, but it's just that she's going into depth on terms of that. How far are you going to finish, Ms. Maseti?
Thank you, Chairperson. No, Chairperson, I will truncate it. I think it is the issue under the tribunal. It was indicated in terms of the rules of the tribunal that NERSA has now developed and they were gazetted, and that now NERSA will be able to sit as a tribunal. I was simply explaining the gaps in terms of the weakness.
Ms. Maseti, we are out of order now. I'm just asking, how long now are you going to take from now? There seemed to be a sort of a panic in terms of time.
Yes.
How long are we going to take?
Thank you, Chair. 3 minutes, Chairperson, or even 2 minutes?
Okay. It can be less than that. Just finalize and complete it.
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, just the last point that I just wanted to emphasize is just on the issue of the timelines for the determination of the tariffs. We have had also some challenges in terms of late applications that we receive from the municipalities. Most of the applications that we receive, we receive them after the 15th of March. Why the 15th of March? It is because of it is the statutory timeline that is prescribed in terms of the Municipal Finance Management Act, that all the applications for the municipalities must be approved before 15th of March. If they are approved after the 15th of March, then they will not be applicable in that financial year come the 1st of July of that the same year. We have now changed that, so we have now started a process so that there is compliance and municipalities must submit their applications on time. We have sent out a notice as well as letters inviting municipalities to submit their applications on the 12th of December. We have extended that to the 13th of January 2026, and thereafter we undertake the public consultation process, and so that we can be able to process all of the 177 applications for the municipalities or distributors before the 15th of March. Thank you, Chairperson. That is all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maseti. And now, Secretary?
It's the Presidency now, Chair.
Okay. Over to you, Presidency. Then can I request the honorable members to note their questions so that we don't even take a lot of time by perusing. Then from this presentation, you take note, because I know for a fact that you will have more questions than answers for now. But let's give Presidency, because these presentations are interlinked to one another.
Good morning, Honorable Chair. Good morning, Honorable members, colleagues. Thanks, Honorable Chair, for allowing us to present. Mr. Masker, who is part of the team at the presidency, will be leading the presentation, but I thought I'll just preface the presentation, Honorable Chair, perhaps to give a bit of context. First of all, this is work in progress, so it's not final. It's still going through a whole series of different consultations. Secondly, this falls under the Operation Vulindlela reforms of electricity with the specific focus on the development of electricity distribution industry roadmap, Honorable Chair. And that task has largely been given under the National Energy Crisis Committee, that is the president's structure in doing this. What the NECOM colleagues have done, have set up a team from the colleagues from SALGA, from the Department of EE, as well as ESCOM distribution in developing this. But as I've said, this remains work in progress. The team, Honorable Chair, will provide you a high-level sense of the process and the progress that had been made. The third and last and most important point, Honorable Chair, this builds on the important presentation that the Minister had made on the distribution agency agreement. So the distribution agency agreement is a critical and important intervention in the short to medium term to assist ailing distributors at a municipal level. The EDI reform roadmap should rather be seen as an important component of the DAA, but for the medium to long term, because that reform is a significant reform that takes a bit of time. So I think it's important just to preface those three comments, and let's just hand it over to Mr. Masker, who is in my team, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, to take you through broadly the presentation on our sort of thinking on the EDI reform roadmap that is more medium to long-term strategy around how we deal with some of the constraints and challenges at the municipal distribution for electricity. Thank you.
Good morning, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, and thank you, Rudy, for the introduction. As Rudy said, my name is Saul Masker from the Presidency as well as the NECOM Secretariat, and I will briefly go through this overview presentation on the EDI reform roadmap. I think it will be clear from the presentations that the committee has heard so far that the EDI, the electricity distribution industry, faces very significant challenges. And I think that this discussion is particularly important now, given that there has been a focus to date on, firstly, the generation sector, given the very important challenge of load shedding in recent years, as well as the transmission sector, the part of the value chain, and the need to increase available grid capacity to connect new generation, and comparatively little focus on the distribution industry. And of course, no matter what progress we make in generation and transmission, if we're not able to address the challenges in that last part of the value chain in distribution, then we will continue to see vulnerabilities in our energy system. And that's why we in the National Energy Crisis Committee, in the second phase of NECOM, which began last year, have placed a particular focus on distribution reform and the EDI reform roadmap. So as Rudy said in his introduction, given that the EDI roadmap is still work in progress, this presentation will really focus on, firstly, outlining the purpose and objectives of the roadmap in order to brief the committee. Second, the process that has been followed to date and where we are in that process. And finally, an overview of the high-level approach that the roadmap is taking. And we will be, once the roadmap itself is finalized, we would be happy to present further detail at that point. First, again, to emphasize the point about the relationship between this EDI roadmap and the distribution agency agreements, which have been presented to the committee in other presentations. The DAAs are an immediate response to the crisis at municipal level, and particularly for those municipalities that are in debt to Eskom and are not compliant with the conditions in terms of National Treasury's debt relief program. And so in that sense, DAAs are a necessary short-term response to stabilize those municipalities which are in crisis and to prevent a further accumulation of debt. And we won't in this presentation go through that model at length because it has been presented before, but simply to note here that the DAA model is incorporated as part of the broader EDI reform roadmap and foregrounded in the roadmap. So there is no conflict between them. At the same time, though, what the roadmap recognizes is that we need to look beyond DAAs towards the longer-term reform of the electricity distribution industry in order to address not only the symptoms of failure at municipal distribution level, but the underlying systemic and structural root causes that are leading to a recurring crisis in municipalities and which are related to effectively the design of the system. So, that is going to take some time. There are no quick solutions or silver bullets, and so DAAs are absolutely important in many cases to address the immediate crisis while we look to those longer term reforms. The committee, I think, has heard extensively about the nature of the crisis at municipal level, and just to briefly reflect on the diagnosis that the EDI reform roadmap sets out in this regard. The EDI faces both an operational crisis and a financial crisis, and the two are inextricably related. At an operational level, we're seeing aging and failing infrastructure as a result of historical underinvestment, poor asset management and maintenance backlogs. The backlog of investment in the municipal distribution among municipal distributors is well over 100 billion rand. And that's simply as a result of inadequate investment over a long period of time. And that is combined with governance and skills shortages, instability at municipal level, but also lack of technical expertise and capability, which have contributed to those failures. And then at a financial level, we've seen very weak revenue collection, in fact, declining revenues in many cases, even as tariffs have increased over time, as well as worsening electricity losses, which has its roots in a lack of maintenance and poor management of the system, but has financial consequences for the distribution utility. So we've now reached a point where many municipalities are in fact operating these services at a loss despite increasing tariffs in many instances. So we have this multi-pronged challenge, and the two symptoms feed into each other. At a systemic level, many of these problems can be traced back to the structure of our system, in which we have Eskom as well as 167 licensed municipal distributors, which has led to fragmented service provision. It is unusual globally to have that many distribution utilities operating in one country. And the result is that many of those distributors operate either in geographical areas which are rural and lack sufficient economies of scale, enough customers of enough diversity and quality to actually sustain the business, and are often too small to have the technical skills and capability to operate a complex service such as an electricity distribution network. So these relatively small, often far-flung, dispersed distributors struggle to maintain their operations or to have a sufficient revenue base to do so. And you can see that in the sense that roughly 15 municipal distributors out of the 167 account for 3/4 of all volume in the distribution industry. And that means that the remaining 152 distributors are serving very small volumes, very small consumer bases, and that is not a sustainable model. And so we have this deep and worsening crisis in the EDI that needs to be addressed. And this is simply to emphasize the point that it requires structural reform, and it requires a deep and hard look at the design of the system, and not just short-term solutions. And so to address that very complex challenge, the National Energy Crisis Committee established a dedicated workstream on EDI last year. That workstream is co-chaired by Eskom and SALGA and supported by the NECOM Secretariat. Overall, NECOM is led by the Minister of Electricity and Energy and by the department. And underneath that workstream, a work group on EDI reform was established specifically to develop this EDI reform roadmap. Work began towards the end of last year and has continued through this year. Represented in that work group are all of the stakeholders that are involved in the sector, including the Department of Electricity and Energy, COGTA, National Treasury, Eskom, NERSA, SALGA, the AMEU, SANEDI, the DBSA, and MISA, in addition to the Presidency. So it's a diverse group of stakeholders that has been working on this roadmap and the approach that we set out in the remaining slides. It's important to say that it's not only about the immediate challenges that have emerged for many municipal distributors in recent years, but also about pressures towards reform, both in South Africa and in the global environment, that mean that EDI reform is necessary right now, and in fact is happening not only here, but in many other countries. On the demand side, we're seeing technological changes and advances which are changing the way in which consumers utilize energy and the sources from which they draw. An increasing focus on energy efficiency, which is partly driven by tariff escalations, a very rapid uptake of embedded generation like rooftop solar, which has been increased by load shedding in recent years, the emergence of wheeling and direct supply to large customers, in particular for renewable energy, and although it is relatively slow, an increasing uptake of electric vehicles. So those technological changes, certainly in the last few years, are changing the way in which distribution networks have to operate. And on the supply side, we're seeing very significant reforms, which are advanced now, but will have an impact eventually on the distribution industry as well. Eskom is being unbundled into separate businesses for generation, transmission, and distribution, with the National Transmission Company of South Africa already established. We are seeing the restructuring of tariffs associated with that reform and the unbundling of tariffs. And finally, wholesale electricity market reform, with the establishment of the competitive wholesale market anticipated next year, and very significant progress already made towards that. And so in future, there will be multiple generators competing to supply the system, and distributors as participants in the market will need to adapt in order to participate effectively. And that requires a very different approach from what distributors have been used to until now for many decades, which is purely to buy electricity in bulk from Eskom and to sell that on to consumers. Participating in a competitive wholesale market is a very different story and requires different capabilities in order to do so effectively. And so although in the design of the market reform there is a gradual phased transition in order to protect municipalities to a large extent from exposure to the market at too early a stage, if we take a longer term view, we do need to consider the need for distributors to prepare themselves. And so there are these important drivers, fundamental drivers of reform linked to these technological changes in the energy system globally, which make EDI reform imperative. You can see that elsewhere in the world, and as part of developing the EDI reform roadmap, we've looked extensively at similar reform processes in other countries. I won't go through each of these in detail, except to say that there are certain trends and outcomes which are remarkably consistent across both developed and developing countries. Firstly, there is a very clear trend towards the separation of retail and wires businesses, as they're called. In other words, the separation of the distribution network itself and the management and operation of that network as a natural monopoly and essentially an infrastructure business from the retail business, which is about the buying and selling of power, trading of power, and the retail interface with customers. And that is necessary both to enable participation in the market and enable open access to the grid as competition is introduced, but also to introduce greater efficiency in operations, because effectively these are two very different businesses which are best served independently. And so in almost all cases, that distinction has been introduced. We've also seen consolidation, very significant consolidation of distributors in most countries. In some, like in Argentina and to an extent Brazil, that has been imposed, where countries have consolidated or merged distributors in order to end up with fewer larger distributors. But in many other cases, that has happened naturally. It has either been incentivized through the tax system or other incentives, or it has simply happened as a matter of course that distributors have merged among themselves and naturally consolidated, like in Canada, where in the state of Ontario, we've seen a consolidation of distributors from 300 to just 60 today. In Australia and in New South Wales, as another example, they went from 20 distributors down to 3 without any kind of regulatory or legislative intervention, simply because it makes more sense to have fewer larger distributors with larger economies of scale, larger revenue bases, in order to operate the business efficiently. And so, these are the kinds of trends that we're seeing elsewhere in the world. And of course, South Africa's EDI reform needs to take into account not just best practice internationally, but local context, specific challenges in South Africa and characteristics of our system in order to tailor those reforms to our context. And then finally, it's important to see EDI reform as part of a broader process of reform at local government level as part of Operation Vulindlela, the economic reform program, which has prioritized local government as part of the second phase of the reform agenda. We've seen the Metro Trading Services Reform Program, which is being implemented by National Treasury as one related component of the local government reform program that involves reforming the trading service functions in metros for electricity, water, now also waste management, in order to ring-fence those entities within the metros, to professionalize them and to improve their performance with a conditional grant provided as an incentive for the implementation of those financial and governance reforms. And of course, the ring-fencing and professionalization of those utilities, which include electricity, is closely related to the EDI reform and is supportive of it. We're seeing similar reforms also in the water services sector, with the separation of the role of water service authorities and water service providers, the Water Services Amendment Bill, which has been introduced in Parliament, and the introduction of a licensing system for water service providers, which has not existed before. And so the same kinds of problems that we're seeing in the EDI are also evident, for example, in water, but speak to the broader challenges in the local government system. They're not unique to electricity, but there's a similar logic being repeated across all of these reforms, and there is an effort to make sure that these various reform processes are closely aligned and coordinated. In the end, the objectives of EDI reform are to create efficient, future-proof utilities that can provide affordable electricity and reliable electricity to all South Africans. And this diagram from the roadmap in draft it just summarizes what the characteristics of an effective utility of the future would be. So, of course, a reliable service, reduced energy losses, and outages, cost-effective operations, efficiency that can be passed on to the consumer in order to arrest escalations in tariffs, strong customer engagement, and a consumer-facing function that includes a focus on demand management and energy efficiency, an appropriate regulatory environment, and one in which regulations and license conditions are effectively enforced and followed through on, financial stability that leaves electricity utilities in a strong financial position and enables them to invest adequately in their assets and infrastructure in order to maintain those and expand them, and a tariff structure that enables efficient cost recovery, but without excessive escalations. So that's what we're trying to achieve. Of course, we're a very far way from that, but it's important to set out those objectives clearly. In terms of the approach that the EDI reform roadmap takes, the high-level approach is relatively simple, and it's rooted in the acknowledgement that not all municipalities are the same. So whereas previous efforts at EDI reform have taken a one-size-fits-all approach, the EDI reform roadmap, learning from those lessons, has proposed a differentiated approach. So that recognizes that, there are some municipalities, those in Pathway 1, which are in default to Eskom or severely distressed. They are unable to effectively provide an electricity service, either because they're too small, they don't have a sufficient revenue or consumer base, or they lack the technical skills and capability to do so. Those municipalities, which are the ones most immediately in crisis, need a pathway of strong and sustained intervention. And in those instances also, some level of consolidation is likely to be needed because the municipalities are too small to sustain a service of this scale and complexity. And so that pathway would involve those municipalities applying a Section 78 process in terms of the Municipal Systems Act in order to determine an alternative service delivery option, which might include consolidation in some cases, but which would really identify, firstly, whether the municipality is capable of running the service internally, and if not, what the appropriate external mechanism would be. And to be really actively supported through that process to make sure that the Section 78 process is followed adequately and that the recommendations are implemented. There are then in Pathway 2 those municipalities which are struggling financially or operationally, but do in fact have the capability to perform or to improve their performance with structured intervention, including ring fencing of the electricity businesses. So Section 78 process would also apply here, but these are larger municipalities that in theory, with stronger management interventions ring fencing to ensure that the utility controls the full value chain from billing and revenue through to asset management and the customer interface, and support in terms of systems, skills, and technical capability could improve their service and continue to operate it. So it's a form of intervention and support to get the utility working effectively, but it may not require consolidation or an external service delivery mechanism. And then finally, there are those municipalities, although they are few, as was clear in the previous presentation, which are actually performing well. They're stable, they're functioning. They may require some reforms in order to modernize, to ring fence their businesses, to keep up with evolving trends, and to ensure that their performance continues. But one doesn't want to destabilize those operations where they are working. And so in short, it's an approach that says, let's take these 167 municipal distributors through a thorough data-driven diagnostic exercise. Let's organize them into these three categories, and let's design a pathway for each category that is suited to the characteristics of those municipalities, and put in place the right processes and technical support to intervene at the right level in order to reach that utility of the future on the previous slide. So that is the high-level approach that the roadmap sets out in terms of long-term reform. What the roadmap also says, and what we felt was important to raise here, are a number of no-regret actions. So while those long-term pathways are detailed and defined, there are a number of actions that are immediately required, and which are no regret in the sense that they are common sense actions, which would support a turnaround in performance, and which could be done immediately. The first is to upscale the monitoring and regulatory capacity of NERSA. And I think that was made clear also in the previous presentation. There are efforts underway to improve the enforcement of compliance with license conditions, for example, and that is absolutely necessary. You don't need to wait for a roadmap to do that. The license conditions exist. NERSA is empowered in the existing legislation to monitor them and to enforce them, and the capacity needs to be put in place effectively to do that. The second action is to expand the installation of smart meters, in particular for large power users, to ensure that to improve revenue collection and to enable better credit management, but also to prepare those customers and those networks for the introduction of the market and for a modern distribution system. So again, the rollout of smart meters is something that is obviously beneficial for distributors and should be supported, including where necessary through funding from national government. The third is to ring-fence electricity utility businesses. This is already underway, as I said, through the Metro Trading Services Reform Program, which is very much in implementation, and eventually will need to be expanded beyond the metros. But that's really about ensuring that electricity utilities have control of all of the functions that they need in order to run an efficient utility, but most importantly are able to reinvest the revenues that they earn from electricity services into electricity assets. And then only to the extent that there is a surplus available beyond that, to make use of that for other purposes in the municipality. But where we've seen at the moment revenues being diverted to other uses at the expense of electricity infrastructure, and resulting in the decay of that infrastructure, that can be addressed effectively through ring fencing. The fourth action is to develop a consistent approach to revenue management. And that is about improving revenue collection systems at municipal level, but also about putting in place restructured tariffs based on the actual cost of supply that address the difference between fixed and variable charges. And in particular, as the market is introduced, enable distributors to fully recover the actual cost of the distribution network, separate from variable charges like energy, so that even as competition increases, the distribution network is adequately provided for. And that work is already underway, but will be necessary to ensure the financial sustainability of distributors going forward. Fifth, to deal with asset management issues. So NERSA to expand its audits of the compliance with license conditions, but also to actively help municipal distributors to put in place asset management systems, modern systems, that correctly identify what should be prioritized and what level of investment is required in those assets. And the ADAM, or Approach to Distribution Asset Management Program, is already in place in this regard, led by DEE and implemented through DBSA. Sixth, to develop performance-based incentives for utilities to follow this reform journey. The Metro Trading Services Reform Program is a good example of this. It offers very powerful incentives for those financial and governance reforms to be implemented by metros. And you could apply a similar model, for example, to the advanced metering infrastructure strategy in the rollout of smart meters. And so I think in short, just to highlight the key takeaways from this presentation, there is a very deep and fundamental crisis in the EDI in South Africa that has its roots in structural problems and systemic problems that need to be addressed through structural reform, even as we intervene in the short term to stabilize municipalities and arrest the increasing debt to Eskom. The EDI reform roadmap is aimed at outlining an approach to implementing those reforms that is differentiated, that doesn't apply a one-size-fits-all model, but that does enable robust intervention in those municipalities that are not able to sustainably operate in the manner that they have been. And the roadmap is being finalized through NECOM and working closely with the Department of Electricity and Energy in order to set out an approach that is clearly understood by everyone in the sector. So as things stand now, DEE is processing the roadmap and making final changes to it. Once that's done, there will be an engagement with the public on the draft roadmap before it's submitted to Cabinet for approval in the first half of 2026. In the meantime, NECOM is engaging with key stakeholders within government and beyond government around the no-regret actions that are identified, so that we're not simply waiting for a roadmap to be approved, but those things that need to be done in the short to medium term can be done, and we can go ahead with those actions with the responsible departments taking the lead. And so that's where we are in the process. We think it's very important to have a comprehensive and detailed view of EDI reform in a roadmap of this kind that brings together a lot of the input that the committee has heard in the previous presentations, and we're happy to take any questions in that regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Presidency. Hariko?
It's question and answer time, Chair. Just to indicate as well, Chair,
Nico?
The following departments and entities are on the platform as well. The Department of Electricity and Energy, Eskom, and COCTA. I don't know if they are representatives of SALGA, Chair, I'm not sure. But the others who has presented, there is representation on the platform as well, Chair, just to inform members. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so you are saying it's COCTA, Eskom, and then the third one? Hariko?
The Department of Electricity and Energy, Chair.
Oh, it's us, Kalu. We are present. Okay, thank you very much. And then it's question. NECOM, where is NECOM?
They are on the platform, Chair.
Presidency, Chair, Honorable Chair.
Presidency, Chair.
Oh, okay, it's okay. Oh, thank you. Now it's time for questions, interact, comments, etc. But can I request, honorable members, we use the 10 minutes agreement, and Ariko is going to assist us with timekeeper as a timekeeper. So let me recognize and check the hands, honorable members. I see Honorable Bapti, Honorable Brian first hand, and Honorable Bapti second hand. Okay, can we start with Honorable Brian and followed by Honorable Bapti? Thank you.
Chair, the reality of South Africa is that what these organizations that are here today that are providing electricity or that seek to provide electricity, the problem that they have is that the ultimate customer for consumer of electricity is not the municipality actually. It is the consumer. It is the person living in South Africa. Now, what is confronting the person living in South Africa is that the economy is not growing at an average of less than 1% over the last 10 years. We have 43% unemployment. So a large portion of the people that consume electricity are unemployed and live with people that are unemployed that they have to support. And there is huge inequality and there's poverty. That is the profile of the customer. The vast majority of customers, if I was to talk about those people who are the majority of South Africans, who are black people, incidentally. Now, my question is, the money that the municipalities are now accumulating as debt to ESCOM, where do you think it is going to come from to pay ESCOM? Given the picture that I've just painted, that the ultimate customer, when we cut to the chase and say, who is the ultimate customer? Can they afford to repay that money? Can they afford electricity? That is the problem that requires resolution. I've heard all the beautiful English that has been spoken today and the comparisons to Canada and Argentina and Australia. But the reality in South Africa is very different. We have a very poor population, huge inequality, and unemployment, and no economic growth. Issues that are not being addressed, by the way, by the government of national unity. So, where will the money come from to pay back ESCOM? Number one. Number two, where will the money come from in the long run to buy this electricity? I mean, we can restructure the distribution of electricity as much as we like. Fact of the matter is that you cannot get water out of a stone. You cannot get water out of a stone. Fact of the matter is that you cannot get water out of a stone, Chair. So where will the money come from? Number one. And number two, there is, although there is recognition of the differences between municipalities, both inter and intra. By intra, I mean Khayelitsha and downtown Cape Town, or Khayelitsha and Bishop's Court. There is recognition of that problem, which is actually a critical problem in South Africa. And but what is being said about it is that it will be dealt with. But I'm more interested in how are we going to deal with those differences and those inequalities. This came from the the presentation from the presidency. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Can we request them to answer? It's a question and answer method.
Chair, I'm happy to answer, if I can go ahead.
Yes.
With thanks to Honourable Molefe for the questions. And I think just 2 points in this regard. First, of course, affordability is a key concern. And that is in part what has driven increasing rates of default. It is a challenge with affordability of electricity and the ability of consumers to pay. But I would qualify that by saying that it is also a challenge with a recovery of revenue, including from larger customers, and in many municipalities, even industrial and commercial consumers, on the one hand. And so there's a real problem with the weakness of revenue collection systems themselves and the ability of distributors to collect revenue efficiently, even from those customers that have an ability to pay. For those customers that have no ability to pay, it's a question of the free basic electricity subsidy working effectively to ensure that there is provision of electricity to those households, and that FBE actually reaches the households that it should. I think the second point to make is that we've seen consumer debt to municipalities remaining quite significantly lower than municipal debt to Eskom. In other words, the debt that municipalities owe to Eskom, which is now over 105 billion rand, is accumulating more quickly than actually what consumers owe to the municipalities, which is around 35 to 40 billion rand at the last count. And so it's a question of the efficiency of local government administrations and what they are spending electricity revenues on, as much as it is about consumers, payment by consumers. So even where you have relatively good rates of payment, the money is not reaching Eskom. It is being diverted to other, sometimes inefficient uses within a municipality. And finally, I think, this really, the point that Honourable Molefe makes really reinforces the need for reform in some cases, because where you have a municipality which has, let's say a geographically far-flung or rural municipality, which has a revenue base with largely poor consumers with little ability to pay. That municipality and its electricity business is unlikely to be sustainable compared to a wealthier municipality which has either a larger revenue base or a wealthier revenue base. So we have many small municipalities which simply don't have the economies of scale needed to sustain their business. And through a process of consolidation, you could actually arrive at a footprint between several municipalities with a revenue mix or a consumer mix that is actually sufficient to sustain the business and to enable cross-subsidization. And that's part of the structural weakness in the system as it stands. So in short, I think to agree that there's definitely the problem of affordability is central to this, but there are a number of other factors as well that we need to consider.
Yes, Chair. I've come to accept that every time we ask questions here, not all of them will be answered. But so on the question of consumer debt versus municipality debt, what is the possibility that this debt is actually not strictly back-to-back in the sense that you'd like to think about it, that what is being supplied to consumers is what the municipality is taking from Eskom. So there is the element in consumer debt which is not captured by municipalities, which is the electricity that is stolen, that is connected illegally, and so on and so forth. So while Eskom knows how much electricity it is delivering to municipalities, municipalities might not know what they're delivering to customers, unless you can say without fear of contradiction that those systems are comparable on a back-to-back basis, and that what you call municipal debt and what you call consumer debt to municipalities is accurately the same thing. But where in the world has privatization, which is what the march now is, a new liberal march towards privatization of this sector, where has privatization resolved the problem of unaffordability? Where has privatization resolved the problem of poverty? Where has the privatization resolved the problem of unemployment? In a sector such as this one, how can you make a product more affordable by privatizing in the manner in which we envisage to do? Are we not being insensitive to the real plight of the majority of people in South Africa by privatizing? It would appear that this privatization thing is meant for the few who can afford, the few who live in the richer part of South Africa, which is few people with a lot of resources, and that the vast majority are outside of this paradigm of privatization in the way in which we are boldly marching in this new liberal paradigm. Thank you.
Your time is up, Mr. Molefe. Chair.
Can we ask the response for that to question of Mr. Molefe, and then we go to Honorable Bapti?
Thank you, Chair. And just to agree, I suppose, with Honorable Molefe in answer to the second question, and to clarify that there is nothing in the EDI reform roadmap that suggests or proposes privatization. Distribution networks are natural monopolies in the sense that there can be only one of them in a given area. It makes sense for them to be public assets. Chair? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So it makes sense for distribution networks to be operated as public utilities and to be regulated as natural monopolies. When we talk about reform and consolidation, that could take several forms. It could take the form of Eskom operating the service in a given municipality, as is proposed with the DAA model. It could take the form of a regional public utility, as was initially proposed in the first EDI reform process in the mid-2000s. It could also take the form of multi-jurisdictional service authorities, where several municipalities come together to jointly provide an electricity distribution service. So there are many different forms that the service delivery mechanism could take, short of privatization. Indeed, where we've seen privatization of distribution in other countries, the effect has often been increased prices, and in some cases decreased efficiency or underinvestment in the assets. And so even as competition is introduced, the intention is not to privatize the distribution assets, but to reform them so that they are delivered more efficiently and at the right levels, and with appropriate economies of scale.
Chair, may I proceed?
Proceed, Mr. Baptiste.
Thank you. Do you need my... If you don't mind, I will switch it off to save my data space.
Honorable Baptiste.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, just increase your volume.
Okay, is that any better?
Yes, it's hard to hear you.
Great. Thank you, Chair. My first engagement will be with NERSA. We have confirmed that there are 177 municipal...
Chair, my apologies. I cannot hear Honorable Baptiste. I'm not sure if I'm the only one.
The sound is poor, yes, Mr. Tring.
That's
why I was requesting him to increase the volume, rather, or come closer to the mic.
I'm right at the mic now, and I'm got volume at max. Can you hear me?
Now it's even worse, yeah.
Perhaps, Chair, Honourable Baptiste is having a challenge with his device. It could be a hardware issue. Perhaps he can write his questions on the chat.
Like myself, or we can give him another opportunity so that he can be able to set up.
Better?
No, something has blocked his mic, right?
No, Mr. Baptiste, it's not improving.
Please continue with the others. I'll do what I can here.
All right, sir. Maybe go out and come in again, Mr. Baptiste.
Will do.
Sure. Chair, so who's next? Mr.
Honorable Ngosi and Honorable Wayne. Is it Wayne or Wayne? Honorable Tring, is it Wayne or Wayne?
It's Wayne. It's Wayne, like you would say, which way? Wayne.
Okay.
Yes.
Wayne.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You'll follow after Mr. Ngosi or Honorable.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Greetings to all honorable members in the meeting. Greetings to the Presidency, to NERSA as well. Honorable Chair, my first question will go directly to NECOM. Just want to understand what is National Electricity Crisis Committee's specific measurable targets and timeframes for implementing the recommended reforms, like your debt recovery, infrastructure spend, and all that. What mechanisms are in place to ensure that COGTA and the National Treasurer enforce these reforms? That is my first question, Chair.
It's fine. Let's allow them to answer it's a question and answer, and you ask the second one. Thank you. Over to you, Presidency or...
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Honourable Nkosi for the question. So the role of NECOM is to coordinate the various departments and entities that are responsible for different, parts of this effort. And each of those programs has its own timeframes. For example, with the debt relief, a program that National Treasury has implemented, or indeed the Metro Trading Services Reform Program, etc. When it comes to the EDI reform roadmap specifically, which NECOM has developed through a consultative, participative process, the roadmap is being finalized at the moment. it will include specific targets and timeframes in order to ensure accountability and transparency and to guide implementation. In broad terms, it is designed as a 5-year roadmap. So the overall timeframe for implementing the approach that the roadmap outlines is a 5-year process. The first phase of implementation, which is about diagnosis and categorization of municipalities along the 3 pathways, would be a 6-month process, and that would be followed by a 12-month process for each municipality to implement one of those 3 pathways. So you're effectively looking at an 18-month timeframe initially, but of course, full implementation and reaching the final outcomes in terms of stabilization and reform would be a longer-term process unfolding over a 5-year period. So, what we have at the moment is that a high-level timeframe in terms of the roadmap overall. In the final document, that will be broken down into specific milestones and timeframes for each underlying step in the process once the Department of Electricity and Energy has finalized it. I hope that's clear.
Thank you. Yes, that is clear. I'll go to NERSA for the next question. What I wanted to actually get here with NERSA is that there is still a rising non-payment of the bulk electricity purchases to Eskom by municipalities, which affects the financiality or the financial stability of the entire electricity supply industry. We know that municipalities are also failing to allocate their recommended 5% to 8% of their tariff revenue for the maintenance and the refurbishment of the infrastructure. And this actually leads to the degradation of the network, resulting in the frequent power outages and high technical losses. I wanted to check with NERSA what specific enforced penalties and interventions is NERSA applying to municipalities that are in chronic breach of their license conditions, especially concerning their failure to maintain infrastructure and pay Eskom.
Thank you, Honorable Nkosi. The first one on the failure to utilize the allocated revenue or budget for maintenance. What NERSA does, we get the reports for assessment at the end of the financial year of the municipality. Usually that there is a one year lag. For instance, if we allocated budget for 2024-2025, the financial year end of the municipality is 30th of June. From there on, in terms of the license conditions, they need to take 3 to 4 months to submit audited financials to NERSA. On the basis of those audited financials, NERSA will be in a position to see how much has not been utilized. But even prior to that, we usually request the municipalities to submit a 6-month report, meaning that if we have approved, say, by June, their tariffs, we expect that in a period of 6 months, they submit a report showing progress, showing how they have dealt with some of the areas that we have identified that they need to pay attention to. So on the basis of that, then we will claw back the money that they have not utilized it, because we want accountability. And to the extent that it does not work and they're not complying with license conditions, issues, we then sit as a tribunal. And as indicated earlier on, we now have the rules that have been gazetted, and NERSA will proceed on that basis just to enforce compliance on that basis.
Thank you. The next question is, now that the cost of supply studies must be public, how can NERSA and the civil societies organization ensure that the technical information is made accessible and understandable enough for meaningful public participation and scrutiny to avoid the court case that we had earlier with NERSA and the Afroforum?
Thank you, Honorable Ngosi. The NERSA, what is going to do is going to comply with the court. Also, however, we have that responsibility of protecting commercially sensitive information. We just need to find out from the municipalities if there is any, specific information that they would like to claim confidentiality on, and then make an assessment of that. That is obviously part of the legal requirements that is in all of the pieces of legislations that are administered by NERSA. It is important that we give them that opportunity, and then we also then publish the cost of supply studies. To the extent that we need to clarify certain things, how they work, I think what we can do is to organize the workshops, as we are also going to organize workshops from next week, so that we can clarify certain things that could be of assistance maybe to the communities, but that obviously is going to also drain the resources of NERSA, because you need to go to different municipalities for us to be able to do it effectively and meaningfully to the benefit of the affected communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Covered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ngosi. Honorable Trim.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm going to start with NECOM. First, just two questions. The first being, noting the global trends of consolidation of distributors, what does NECOM see as a workable model with respect to the number of distributors that would be needed to serve most effectively the needs of consumers? Chair, would appreciate quick responses because it eats into one's time.
Apologies.
Go ahead.
If I can. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Honourable.
Quick responses, just to avoid a waste of time and also etc. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Thring, I think there isn't a specific number of distributors that we've arrived at, and I think the reason is that it will depend on the particular characteristics of each municipality. So the approach that we're suggesting in the roadmap is an assessment on a case-by-case basis, where municipalities not able to adequately provide the service. That municipality, and these are catered for in Pathway 1 that we presented, would need to identify an alternative service delivery mechanism through the Section 78 process. Now, again, that could be Eskom, it could be a regional utility, it could be a concession or management contract, and any of those potential solutions would mean that the service in that municipality although the municipality remains the authority for its area, is provided by a larger utility with a larger footprint. So it's not so much about predetermining the number of distributors that there should be and imposing a kind of consolidation ex ante, but rather identifying which model is best suited in each case. Of course, the key thing will be to make sure that that process is implemented properly and independently, that it identifies the right mechanism, and that the recommendations are implemented. Because what we do know is that although the Section 78 process, the provisions have existed for some time, the process has not been followed in the way that it was designed to in many cases. And that's where the need for very close oversight and support and technical capacity from national government will be important, and where the roadmap will need to set out a clear process with specific timeframes. What we have seen in other countries, though, in allowing that to unfold organically, and I pointed to examples like Ontario or New South Wales, in none of those cases was the number predetermined, but you did see very significant consolidation naturally, in one case from 300 to 60. And so we expect that there would be quite significant consolidation, but naturally as an outcome of the process as opposed to an input to the process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, perfect. Thank you, Chair. I think second question is just with regards to the future-proofing of the utilities, or future-proof utility. That obviously is a, in my view, a long-term goal or vision. But are there any specific timelines to actually achieving future-proof utilities?
I can answer that as well, Honourable Thring. So, as I said too, in answer to Honourable Nkosi, the idea would be to implement the roadmap fully over a period of 5 years, and we think that it is possible to put in place those fundamental conditions within that kind of time frame. But of course, you would need, first to stabilize operations before you get to that point, and that would be the kind of first 2 years out of the 5. To diagnose what is happening in a given municipality, to identify the correct pathway to implement stabilization measures, and before you can get to fully implementing the reform and following the recommendations of the process through to their conclusion. That it's an ongoing process because the sector continues to evolve, and so it's not a kind of fixed point in time. It requires sustaining beyond that time, but that's what we have set out in the roadmap.
Oh, thank you. So it's essentially a 5-year timeline is what you're looking for. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go to in my time that is left. I think it's about 5 minutes to NERSA. And the first question is, having identified the different risks mentioned in the presentation, largely focusing on the risk, focusing on the lack of maintenance, including a skills deficit, what interventions is NERSA looking at introducing to address and to reduce these risks? And if they have introduced interventions, can they give us any positive scenarios where their interventions have produced positive outcomes?
Thank you very much, Honourable Thring. From NERSA's side, I think the key thing, because some of these things are not things that can really be addressed completely and adequately by the independent regulator for its licensees I think what we have decided to do is to partner with the relevant organizations such as AMEU as well as SALGA to bring to their attention some of these challenges. But what we have also done, we attend to meetings that are organized by the MECs of the provinces. One of the examples is the MEC in the Eastern Cape, where all the municipalities of the Eastern Cape were called into a meeting in East London, where we were part of that and provided a presentation. The department was also there, and the mayors and all of that. So all of the challenges facing the municipalities were discussed, including issues of skills, and also I think there is some arrangement also just to get into an arrangement with ESCOM in terms of some of the upskilling them and some of the skills that or to address the issue of the skills that are being experienced by the municipality. So I think there are certain programs that are already being considered by different municipalities. Ours is to highlight some of these risks, and to the extent that there are relevant authorities that can deal with this, we can just supplement some of those activities through cooperation with such relevant associations or authorities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Let me move on. There have been concerns that NERSA actually lacks capacity, particularly when it comes to enforcement of license conditions. So does NERSA have the capacity to monitor all licensees effectively with respect to their compliance or non-compliance of all of the license conditions?
Thank you very much. On that, NERSA has identified the need to enhance its capacity, as it is impossible, given the number of the complement of staff at NERSA, to be able to manage and pick up things, even to act proactively to identify some of the non-compliance instances in different municipalities at the right time. So the answer is that we need to just beef up our capacity, and we will have a separate department that just focuses its efforts in regulating the municipalities and also ensuring enforcement of non-compliance with municipalities. Thank you.
No, thank you. So that sounds like an answer to my question, which says currently we do not have the capacity, but we do have a plan to put in place structures to ensure that the gaps are going to be closed. So, yes. So what are your timelines? Noting that there is this gap. What are your timelines to actually closing that gap and to ensure that there are actually warm bodies on seats to ensure that there is this monitoring of all of the licensees?
Thank you very much. We are looking at the sort of crowding in funding so that we get more resources. We have also discussed these aspects at the NICOM level, just so that some of the interventions that have been identified through the roadmap, that NERSA will also be in a position to step in and be able to take up such activities. So the first thing, also, there is an issue of funding. However, we're also going to restructure within NERSA, the department that has already gone through the process itself, so that there is a concerted effort of ensuring that we strengthen our enforcement efforts and activities when it comes to the municipalities for compliance. The timelines, it's very difficult for me to indicate exactly, but it is something that the regulator takes it very seriously and has put some timelines, just internal timelines, to make sure that all of the HR issues are being done. It's something that has already been done.
The short answer, Menier, is to say yes. It will depend after the next financial year. That's it. You'll see on the budget.
Thank you.
short and precise.
Thank you for your intervention, Chair. You've also taken up some of my time. My last question.
Yes, you are going to get your time that has been. Is there any other question, Honorable? Because I was trying to assist in terms of they have to answer exactly prompt and straight to the question, so that
just Chair, if I could beg your indulgence, then Chair, the last question would be on those electrical surcharges that appear to be a caveat of certain municipalities to increase tariffs above the approved rate by NERSA. So what are you doing to actually close this caveat where municipalities abuse the surcharges that they sometimes use?
As indicated, it is outside of our jurisdictions, but the technical team meets with the Treasury so that they address that through the Treasury. And recently, the norms and standards are being developed, as I understand it, and NERSA has commented on that process to try and close and address the issue of surcharges. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Chabele.
Thanks a lot, Honorable Chair, and the committees that are here today. Honorable members, good morning. And I think the first question, I just wanted to do a clarification as to one on NECOM's side of it from the Presidency side.
Honorable Chabele, come closer to the mic or increase the volume.
All right, fine.
Okay.
I think can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I think the first question I just wanted to raise was regarding the issue of NECOM, so that we can at least get the answers promptly. So one is I'm still quite worried because NECOM was a structure which was established before we had the Department of Electricity, even before there was an introduction of the Minister of Electricity. Is there a necessity now to have a continued NECOM under the 2.0? Don't we think we are actually doing a duplication of priorities as well as undermining the Department of Electricity, because NECOM officially by now should be falling under the Department of Electricity? Why do we still have it as a standalone and in the Presidency? That's question number one. Okay, in the meantime, okay, maybe let me just continue while you're gathering the answers. The other issue of really is our recommendation with this current situation is, the continuing problems of South Africa with regards to transforming and evolving the electricity sector are such that you need a focused department that knows how to work strategically and focused in terms of priority environment. Right now, Eskom has got its own priorities. The Department of Electricity have their own priorities. And then now you have the Presidency running yet another almost quasi-department under the NECOM, under the other structures that are under the Presidency in respect to ensuring that electricity generation, electricity distribution and transmission can be fulfilled as a priority. So I think really there's a lot of crossroads and the undermining of mandates as well as resources, particularly allocation. In this case, we're actually spending a lot of money unnecessary for things that we shouldn't be spending. There is no longer an electricity or energy crisis in South Africa. We are post the crisis. The situation is we should be talking about the stabilization of electricity supply. So I think maybe from NECOM's point of view, what is your view on this one?
Thank you, Honorable Nchabeling. So NECOM was established in response to the electricity crisis and out of the recognition that there was a need for a different kind of approach to ensure concerted and properly coordinated focus on addressing the energy challenges. And although we have made very significant progress through that approach in addressing the generation challenges and reducing the severity of load shedding, challenges in certainly transmission and distribution, and to some extent in generation, remain. And so, of course, NECOM is not a permanent structure or institution. It will not exist forever. It is necessary only to get us through this crisis. I think the second point, specifically on our role in the EDI reform process, is that NECOM exists as a coordination mechanism. There were 11 departments and entities involved in developing the EDI reform roadmap, and NECOM provides a platform for seamless coordination in that regard. But it does not replace the role of the Department of Electricity and Energy in leading in this area, which is why the department is currently finalizing the roadmap. It will be the department and ultimately the minister who take the roadmap forward and ensure that it's implemented. NECOM plays a supporting and coordinating role in that.
Much appreciation. So it would actually be prudent for the committee to then advise that Presidency should relook at NECOM in terms of either incorporating it as a permanent structure within the Department of Electricity so that we no longer have a duplication, and the collapsing of the committee as a standalone, because it does no longer perform any purpose that is other than really almost competing directly with the interests of the Department of Electricity. Thanks a lot for that really honest answer. Coming to NERSA, I think the question that we really wanted to get to the bottom of it is, one, at the end of the day, from a NERSA point of view, we've been fighting this battle, and I'm glad that NERSA has acknowledged that they've done a lot of significant work with regards to ensuring that there can be a baseline tariff structure and tariff determination. And until we came onto the scene, by the way, the issue of tariff was never a priority, and we've brought it to the center of the debate on the cost of electricity to our consumers, particularly to the constituencies that we serve out there. The question that is currently burning right now is the issue of the tariff cap. NERSA has a tariff from ESCOM to municipalities, but there is no determined tariff from municipalities to consumers. And that is where the biggest problem is sitting. And I've discussed this issue at length, even really recently when I met up on a casual basis, where we were on a flight with the chairperson of NERSA, to say your biggest problem with regards to NERSA's tariff issue is municipalities have an unfettered power to exaggerate the tariff that is currently charged to consumers to a point where they don't even have any tariff barrier in a sense. You take a R1.85 or R1.20 tariff that is currently provided by ESCOM to municipalities, and then they sell it at R3.50 right up to R5 to consumers. So we just need to get clarity. When are we going to get a determined tariff that should be charged by municipalities to end consumers at a cap level, meaning that the cap should be, say, R3 or R3.50 and no more to a consumer?
Thank you, Honorable Nchabele. Ordinarily, the tariff that is approved by NERSA, if it's about an increase of 12% or 10% or 8%, that is it, and we know what the baseline is, and therefore you simply add the 12%. It is the municipalities or any other licensee is not supposed to charge more than that. However, I understand the fact that what's happening out there during implementation, then some may take advantage of charging more. What is NERSA doing right now? Firstly, there's market inquiry that we have launched already, and we have got very good inputs so far, and we even uncovered even issues of cost that are charged, such as inconvenient cost charged by other merchants, that are selling electricity and so forth. But those findings will then be communicated next year, and there will also be a report. We have invited a number of stakeholders to come forward and provide information. So that is something that NERSA is doing at the moment, and just to check how widespread the problem is. The other thing is that the municipalities, in as much as now they have the cost of supply studies, it will make it easy for NERSA to understand what their costs are and the baselines, and do claw back where the municipalities did something that is different from what NERSA has approved. That's in short. Otherwise, we are looking very closely on those issues.
So are you telling me that...
like Western Cape, where not responsibility?
Chair, I missed the point.
I'm saying like Western Cape that is charging more from the municipality.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
Yeah, on the Section 18 process, can you elaborate a bit further on that? Because I think one of the things is, I just explained to my colleague that when we started this fight with NERSA, he was a head of finance at the time in the Treasury Committee. So he wasn't aware of the issues. So you might have felt that there was a little bit of an over-elaboration. But I just wanted to expand on that because we have a big problem. Electricity is very expensive with regards to how consumers are paying for it out there in the market. Because there's this crisis that NERSA has failed to regulate municipalities on what they can charge and up to how much they can charge. This is not an issue of electricity just being expensive for the sake of it. It's expensive because of NERSA has lowered its guard and has given municipalities almost a free rein to do whatever they want. Electricity coming from ESCOM to municipalities is cheap. R1.20 is currently the tariff that is charged by ESCOM to consumers, to municipality for ordinary consumers. Industrial consumers are ranging between R1 lower than R1.20, but when you get from that R1.20 and they pass it over to consumers with added charges and cost, you find that that is where municipalities are doing this additional surcharges, they are doing the tariff, exaggeration, they are paying themselves bonuses, and we've got many stories of these municipalities with regards to cases such as the City Power issue, where City Power wanted to charge 200 rands additional to the tariff, and it was only when people pushed back against it that City Power reevaluated its situation. NERSA never intervened on those issues and never said anything. What was the case on that part?
If the question is about the Section 18, because I would not know the specific details, maybe because there's a number of other non-compliance and contraventions that are happening. Some of them we are going to put them before the tribunal, as NERSA is going to sit as a tribunal, so I would not know the specific details. But if you're asking about what is the issue around Section 18, Section 18 makes it difficult for NERSA to go straight to the issue and say, you have done something wrong. And when we cannot tolerate it, then we can be firm and go straight to a tribunal and prove that this is an allegation. Here's the evidence to that effect. And because you have done something that you are not supposed to do, therefore here is the penalty or the admin that we are proposing to that tribunal, and the tribunal then looks into the case. We are unable to do so. So as I indicated, all that we can do is to sit as a tribunal. Why can't we just issue that as NERSA? You found something, they went there, they did the audits, and then they find evidence, and then issue a notice of non-compliance. Give them whether it is a month, and thereafter that move to the next step. If they're not doing it, off the red card, like the admin fine. We are unable to do that. That's the problem of Section 18. The worst issue that we have done, even now, I think it's also in the public domain, is the Cederberg municipality and the other company. What happened there is that they operated without a license. The license has expired. What did we do? We've got all the evidence, and they just did not even get registrations. Now, we look at what can we do here. Then the Act does not allow us where it says that if a person operates without a license, that person is not allowed to do that, but it doesn't give us powers what we must do. So we can't act on that. We can only act if it is a licensee. So they choose not to have the license and then sit back. It can happen at any given point in time, even if they want to trade without a license. If then we find that they don't have a license, we can't impose a fine. That's the problem of the law. Thanks.
Your time is up, Mr. Ntshabileng. Chair.
I took 1 minute of Mr. Ntshabileng. Can you give him if he has another question. I was just adding.
Thanks for your indulgence, Chair. I truly appreciate the gesture. I think more than anything, let's take this moment to applaud the committee for the work it has done on pushing this issue of NERSA and the tariff crisis that has been created. We really have a real crisis on tariffs right now. There's a huge amount of tariffs that are existing, and we would really like to say maybe, I think what NERSA forgot to say is that if it was not the push by the committee to ensure that we deal with this issue of tariff and the tariff crisis, so far we wouldn't see this agency, an emergency around NERSA's housekeeping, where now municipalities are compliant. You have now their cost of services studies in place, and then you have the workshops that have been done to determine what are the costs that relates to how they set up tariffs. This didn't happen before until the committee intervened. So as the parents of the departments, as well as these entities, we should actually be applauded for the great work. And thanks a lot, Chair, for the indulgence and opportunity.
And thank you also for NERSA for achieving those milestones. Thanks, Honorable Nchabeli.
Thank you, Honorable Member, and also official. Can I check Honorable Fasia?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. My apologies, as you've noted, I am battling with the flu and an upper respiratory tract infection, so I'm not going to have my camera on the whole time. I thought it's just important for the beginning for people to see that we are in fact here, and of course hardworking throughout the whole process. I have my first question, Chair, is to deal with the investment in the EDI infrastructure. That 5 to 8% that's required for the investment in the infrastructure, does it mean that we'll be avoiding sharp hikes in municipal electricity tariffs? Let's start there very quickly. Chair, my timer must be paused while we're waiting for a response. Yeah, otherwise I'm going to run out of time.
Okay, response?
Chair, I believe that question is to the regulator.
Yes, it is. Must I repeat, NERSA?
Yes, repeat it, please.
Okay. So will the 5 to 8% that's required for investment in the EDI infrastructure mean that we could avoid sharp hikes in municipal electricity tariffs?
It is. Thanks for the question, Honorable Hassan. It is difficult to do so, but what we have been doing all along, we have always been granting the 5 to 8%. In fact, it was 6% the minimum, and it goes to 8%. Some they have actually invested off just for maintenance and repairs. Actually, it was only for that, up to 10%. But we will be able to see how that has been spent. It has never increased the tariffs significantly, perhaps because at the time we were using the guideline increases as a maximum, as well as the benchmarks at the time. So now that we are using the cost of supply, we will also be able to ask the municipalities to split their cost, just like other distributors such as Eskom that has split their cost, so that there can be more transparency and see what the money has been used for and what the money or how much was spent on what purpose. Thanks.
Okay, I think it's hard for you to say it, but in theory it should, because it means that we're investing in the infrastructure and it means we have a better outcome and a better output, and spread that cost over a greater deal of surface area, so to speak. My next question is, should we recreate regional electricity distributors to ensure local economic efficiency, particularly in this EDI sector? That's to NERSA.
Chairperson, I'm unable to answer that question. It is not something that we have thoroughly considered at the moment. I would like maybe that question to be answered in writing. It is difficult for me to answer it at this stage. Thank you.
All right, so I'm a little concerned. I don't think it's that hectic a question, but we'll pose it in writing. I'll just repeat it. Should we recreate regional electricity distributors to ensure local economic efficiency? I don't think it's rocket science, but okay, you can respond in writing. And then if you do respond in writing, we'll expect a more detailed and efficient response in that way. Chair, I think it's very important to talk about this tariff issue because the reality is it didn't just come about in this portfolio committee and it didn't come about today. This is an issue that has been championed by an NC-led government that has been led by President Ramaphosa, particularly when he established a very standalone portfolio committee, or rather department, to ensure that the issue gets the relevant, necessary attention that it requires. And I think it's very important that we appreciate and welcome both the presidency and the department through NECOM, their interventions. And that's actually my next question, Chair, to Mr. Musker, regarding the interventions of NECOM around load shedding, and whether there's a belief or view that had there not been those interventions or those reforms, would we still be in the situation where we are now with no load shedding that's pronounced?
Thank you, Honorable Hassan. I think that the value of the coordinated approach through NECOM has definitely been shown through the response to load shedding. After the President announced the Energy Action Plan in July 2022 and established NECOM as a mechanism at the center of government to coordinate its implementation, we saw a range of interventions being implemented, coordinated very efficiently and with strong accountability for all of the very wide range of departments and entities that had to play a role in different parts of that plan. And as a result, the Energy Action Plan was fully implemented. And that has had a very direct impact in reducing load shedding over the last 3 years. And I think what we are saying through the ETI reform roadmap is that we need to apply a similar approach to addressing the crisis in the distribution sector. There's a wide range of things that will need to be done, interventions made by National Treasury, by NERSA, by the Department of Electricity and Energy, by municipalities themselves and organized local government, by COGTA. And we need, rather than a kind of piecemeal or patchwork approach, we need a very determined, very well-coordinated effort and guided by this roadmap to replicate our success in addressing load shedding. And if we don't do that over the next several years, we may find that the challenges in distribution become as serious as they were in generation.
Thank you very much. Actually, that leads me to my next question related to distribution, but more particularly on the alignment with Operation Vulindlela and local government reforms. How are you ensuring that the EDI reform, the metro trading services reform, and water services reforms, all that are happening under Operation Vulindlela, are synchronized such that metros and small municipalities are not pulled in different directions by conflicting instructions from DE, Treasury, COGTA?
Thank you, Honorable Hassan. So there are a number of reform efforts underway in different parts of government addressing local government reform. All of those are coordinated through Operation Vulindlela to ensure synergies between them and alignment. We have regular meetings with all of the departments responsible for different parts of the reform agenda. We've established a monthly coordination meeting to ensure that happens. In fact, that meeting is happening now in parallel with this committee, and that includes National Treasury, COGTA, the Department of Electricity and Energy, the Department of Water and Sanitation, and a number of other departments as the need arises. And we've used that mechanism to make sure that we're all working in one direction. The logic of all of these reforms, whether in electricity or water, is actually very similar. It is about ring-fencing utility functions, implementing professional utilities with through proper financial and governance reforms that are similar to each of these services, and then strengthening regulation in both electricity and water to make sure that there's effective and independent oversight. So the concepts and principles are the same. We're making sure that they're all we're attacking the problem from different angles, but with the same approach.
Thank you. And just to be clear, I also want to pose a question that has come from the chat box. Of course, as MPs, we are voices of the people, and unfortunately, not everyone has participation rights in this meeting. Mr. Mallitson asks, given that Eskom distribution supply is approximately 40% of end-use customers within municipalities, what is there, I would assume NERSA, what is NERSA's experience with regard to Eskom distribution payments to Eskom? And is there also a shortfall, and does it mirror the municipal distribution debt to Eskom?
May I ask Mr. Matebula to respond? Mr. Matebula?
Okay, I'm worried about my time because you're taking very long to respond.
Yes, Chair. I'm trusting that I'm audible.
They have to discuss who's going to answer. I'll try and give you your half a minute.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate that so much.
Yeah, Chair, if I understand the question properly, I think it's asking if there is a default between distribution to Eskom.
Should I repeat the question for you, Mr. Matebula, quickly?
Go ahead.
Given that Eskom distribution supplies approximately 40% of end-user customers within municipalities, what is their experience with regard to Eskom distribution payments to Eskom in particular? Is there also a shortfall, and does it mirror municipal distribution debt to Eskom?
Chair, no. The information in our disposal does not reflect that we are seeing similar defaulters for Eskom distribution as the same as what is at the municipal level. However, what we are seeing is that there is more debt owned to Eskom distribution by municipalities.
Okay, Chair, if I have a minute left, it's on skills pipeline and youth unemployment, which is a critical issue in this country, and as a young MP, it must be asked. The slides have highlighted governance and skills shortages as a core EDI risk. What specific programs, such as apprenticeships, graduate intakes, bursaries, etc., will accompany the reforms to create a pipeline of young engineers, technicians, and artisans into the distribution sector, particularly in secondary and rural municipalities? This can be to either NERSA or NECOM. Presidency.
I'm happy to start. Chair and Honourable Hassan, I completely agree. There's obviously a major skills gap at municipal level in distribution in particular. We need to build those capabilities over time. As part of, in fact, the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan and the work being driven through the JET IP, there is a strategy that's been developed on skills, and that includes, in fact, prioritizes skills within municipalities. And quite a lot of support that is being directed to that, not only from government and through DHET, but also from through international partnerships. And part of the EDI reform roadmap in its 5-year vision is going to be about building technical capability. And of course, that means building a pipeline of young, capable professionals, engineers, artisans to fulfill those functions. So that is definitely...
Chair, if I can add from NERSA side, I think with the number of graduates that are currently looking for opportunities to be employed, I do not think that necessarily is an issue of shortage of skill, but I think it's matters of budgetary constraints and enforcement of ensuring that the required skills are actually hired within the municipalities where vacancies exist. Thanks.
Your time is up, Mayor San.
Thank you, Chair. I'm covered.
I see Mr. Bapti is back on the platform, Chair.
No, say legacy hand. I think so.
Chair, it's not.
No, it's a new one, Chair.
Yeah?
He came on again, Chair.
Okay, because he couldn't. Okay, go on, Honorable Bapti. Will be the last one.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to first address NERSA, and I want to acknowledge the progress that was made in the 25-26 year with cost of supply studies reaching 100%. And I think it's a very necessary progression to make in the changes that are happening within the industry and to get to a better performance from the municipalities. But I'm going to refer first of all to slides 16 and 17, which deal with the conditions for acquiring a distribution license. And we will see in those slides there's quite an extensive set of criteria. And then if one switches back to slide number 12, and one looks at the adherence to distribution license conditions, we see a rather disturbing story with the high vacancy rates, the absence of ring fencing by any municipality, poor payment levels with many municipalities, no responsible OHS person, maintenance plans either not existing or not being followed, absence of load forecasting. Now, all these things point to the dysfunction within the municipalities. So my question is, how did the municipalities get their licenses in the first instance if the situation has regressed to where it is now, and over what period of time did that regression take place? We see there are 20 licensees referred to the tribunal, but just how many municipalities right now are non-compliant with those conditions required for the granting of a license? That's my first question.
Chair, if I can respond. As indicated, Chair, the audits obviously is not on all licensees at the moment. The feedback that we have actually indicated there was on the current municipalities that we have actually done. But I can indicate that majority of the municipalities that we have audited do not meet the conditions of the license in many aspects. And hence the tribunal sitting will actually be addressing all those non-compliant municipalities.
Thank you, Chair. So I think it reinforces the point that there is a serious problem within the municipality, which I think we all know about. But then just coming to the gap that NERSA have identified in Section 18, my understanding from what has been said this morning is that the National Treasury and the DE are dealing with that particular issue to close the gap. Can that be confirmed by NERSA?
Yes, Chair. What we are doing. Okay, sorry, Ms. Masetti, you can proceed, ma'am. Thanks.
Okay. No, it is not the National Treasury. It is something that we are going to address with the Department of Electricity and Energy. With regards to the weaknesses in the legislation, just to strengthen the powers of NERSA so that NERSA can act decisively when there are contraventions or a breach of license conditions. So it's the DEE jurisdiction. Thank you.
The other thing that has come out this morning is NERSA's vastly increased scope of work as a result of the changes in the regulation. And I think that's why it's become so important in the immediate actions stated by NECOM to upscale NERSA to deal with that particular gap. But I want to address my other questions then to NECOM, to Mr. Muscat. And my first question has to do with the number of municipalities that are distributed. NERSA were quite clear that it's 177, but Mr. Muscat was referring to 167. You can just confirm the actual number.
From our side, we have 177 municipalities that we have licensed. In fact, there are 178. There's one that just linked up with ESCOM for this year. Yeah. So the total that we have licensed is 178. It was more than that until there were certain consolidations that took place in the industry with some of the municipalities. So I can confirm the number. It's 178 in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Then, Chair, my next questions go to Mr. Muster at NECOM. Given that the distribution agency agreement is a short-term intervention, how many municipalities are on a DAA? How many of the defaulting municipalities are on a DAA? And related to that is just how effective is the DAA in the short term in addressing some of the municipality issues?
Honourable Bapti, I can get back to you on the exact number of municipalities that already have a DAA in place. The 14 municipalities have been identified as priorities, those with the highest debt, and I think that was covered in the ESCOM presentation, but I can confirm how many of those agreements are already in place. In terms of how effective the DAA model is, the DG of DE is in fact also in the meeting, Mr. Pillay, and he I think will be able to come in on both parts of this question as well. In the way that it's captured in the roadmap is that the DAA is a very important step for those municipalities that are in default, at the very least to arrest the decline, to arrest the increase rather, in arrears to ESCOM, so that ESCOM is able to collect revenue directly and not to rely on that being passed on to it by the municipality. And I think that in the instances where it's been applied so far, that has been shown to be true. What the DAA can't do and is not intended to do is to fix the underlying problem of the weakness in the municipality and the weaknesses in the system itself. And so, that's why the broader reforms are required beyond the DAA to actually address those root causes. But as an instrument to stabilize a municipality in distress and to prevent a kind of exponential increase in debt to ESCOM, the DAA is a kind of necessary step. But perhaps Mr. Pillay could add to that response.
That's fine. Thank you. So I want to again just recognize the good work that NECOM have done in addressing, first of all, the generation issue, but coming into the distribution space, and I totally understand the need to rationalize the number of distributors in EDR, and the need to have pathways that are designed for the different set of circumstances that municipalities face. But I have to wonder if to some extent we aren't avoiding the elephant in the room. One of my bigger concerns is that, and it's been spoken about, I think, quite substantially this morning, that is the cost of electricity in an economy that is struggling, and with the number of unemployed people we have and the extent of poverty in the country, the cost is incredibly important in terms of being affordable for the majority of South Africans. And has NECOM at any stage considered whether this electricity and water, for that means as well, whether they should not be dealt with rather than as trading services, as economic services entirely? And perhaps that is happening, but I'm not seeing it. Has NECOM considered the possibility of looking at legislative change which would make electricity or energy and water, rather than a trading service, an economic service in all municipalities, given the cost implications for people who are really struggling to pay their bills every month? I'll deal with that one and then I'll come to my last question.
Honourable Bapti, I think that's a very important point. And in fact, part of the logic behind the ring fencing of these services, regardless of the terminology used, is that the price of that service should reflect its cost and should not exceed its cost. And the revenue that is earned from those services should be reinvested in the service and in the assets, and not used to fund a range of other services, which in the end heaps the various costs of the municipality, including overhead costs, onto those services. And that has broad implications for the local government funding model, which are being addressed through the local government fiscal framework review that National Treasury has initiated and will complete next year. But we do view that as essential, both to address the affordability problem and to ensure adequate investment in the service, as we said earlier. I think the last point to make there is, in terms of cost and affordability, of course, distribution is one part of that cost, and an efficiently run distribution network is important to contain costs. On the other hand, an inefficient distribution business inflates and escalates those costs, and we're seeing that in many municipalities with sort of very large and increasing wage bills, in fact, increasing in some cases above inflation, and that just goes straight into the tariff for the end consumer. But it is ultimately also about generation costs, and the introduction of the competitive market primarily is intended to drive down those costs through competition, greater efficiency, competition on price as well, and the introduction of lower cost energy sources over time. So we need to work, I think, on a number of fronts to reduce the costs in the system as a whole, to ensure that we contain increases and make sure that electricity is affordable, and of course not burden the electricity tariff with costs that are not related to electricity. That's very much part of the logic of the reform.
Thank you. And then just finally,
Mr. Bhakti.
Oh dear. Thank you.
Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Bhakti. Do you have any other question, Honorable Bhakti?
I just had one question.
Just ask it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Really appreciate that from you. And my question is, has NECOM considered a fundamental driver of the growth in debt to Eskom coming from municipalities being the result of simply there being no consequences for the governance within those municipalities?
Honourable Bhakti, I think that is clearly one part of the problem. Both that in the past there have been no consequences for municipalities defaulting to Eskom, and also the wider problem around financial management at local government level. And those municipalities that are in debt to Eskom, are quite closely correlated with those that perform poorly on other measures of institutional performance and financial management. So this is a systemic problem. I think in answer to Honourable Molefe's question earlier on, we pointed out too that the consumer debt to municipalities is quite substantially lower than municipal debt to Eskom. And that suggests that, basically many municipalities are withholding payment to Eskom, while in order to pay for other things. In other words, are not prioritizing bulk payment to Eskom. I think the same is true in many cases of the water boards. So the broader local government reform agenda, which includes, through Operation Vulindlela, professionalization of local government, looking at the institutional structure of local government through the updated white paper, and a number of other reforms, I think are necessary in tandem with EDI reforms specifically, because if you can improve institutional financial performance overall, of course, that will filter through to improved payment levels and more efficient management of these utilities. So these things are all interrelated. It's impossible to disconnect them. And that's why through Vulindlela, we've set out essentially 5 priority reform areas for local government, of which EDI reform is one.
Thank you, Mr. Master, and thank you, Chair, for your indulgence.
Okay, honorable members who are done with questions and answers. So, Ariko, is there a next item?
No, Chair, if that is the case, then we are finished for today, Chair.
Okay. And what about the minutes? No outstanding minutes?
No, we'll consider the minutes next week, Chair.
Okay. Announcement?
Just to indicate again, Chair, the next meeting is this coming Friday, the 28th, joint with Trade and Industry, Transport and Mineral Resources, Chair. Physical in Parliament in the NCUP chambers. Thanks, Chair. And then next week is our last meeting on the 3rd of December. But those are just internal matters that we're dealing with, Chair. Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, I just have my hand raised quickly. I just wanted to check quickly. This is a housekeeping issue. If it's possible, maybe we can release the members of the NICOM as well as members of NERSA, just between ourselves as a committee. Is it possible?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Secretary?
Thank you very much, NICOM, and also NERSA. We really appreciate your presence. So you are excused from the meeting so that we can deal with internal matters. Thanks. Enjoy.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mama said it sure.
I'm just removing those who don't want to leave, Chair.
Okay. Yeah.